Hello, everybody. So last time I was on this stage, I ended up getting engaged to the woman who interviewed me and getting married in October. So good things apparently come from this stage. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about a story of how one company got from building computers and software for emerging markets to building coding education software through games focused on the US. But I first want to start with this quote because I think that this notion of this tension between education and entertainment seems like it's this ever-present challenge, right? So we want kids to learn a lot, we want them to like school, and those things have always been in conflict with each other, so it seems. And ultimately, this talk is about how games offer the ability for those two things to become one. So a little bit about Endless, because it'll make sense of the story I'm about to tell you. So Endless is a collection of companies, effectively, that has been focused for many years on building an operating system and software to teach kids in emerging markets, to teach kids in the most rural parts of the world where there is no access to anything, really. Books are hard to come by. And we built software that poured tons of educational content, effectively an operating system, a Linux-based operating system, that poured tons of educational content into it. And along the way, what we realized was that games were obviously the thing that kids wanted to do most. What we realized was that when you put the computer in front of kids, there was curiosity for everything that was inside of there, but the first folder that they would click on was games. And in that journey, what we realized was that education games, it was kind of fascinating to see the games that they'd want to click on. The most popular game was a game called Tux Math. Now, for reference, Tux Math is a terrible game. It is numbers falling from the sky. It's basically math blasters. We just took it from online, we put it inside, great, we shipped it. And we went to rural communities in places like Guatemala, and we would have a classroom of 15 kids surrounding this computer, looking at this, shouting numbers at each other. There was this yearning to play and to learn. But the challenge was obviously that level. Math Blasters is not our ideal version of what an education game looks like or what a game that enriches you looks like. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the second insight is we started to realize that games held an opportunity for us to teach kids in the most remote regions of the world. We started to realize that games also had an ability to teach kids deeper things than just math. They had the ability to teach, for example, values. So there was a kid who, a teacher who I was interviewing, and she was telling the story of one of her students. And the student, the father was in prison. This was in a very rural community in Latin America. The father was in prison. The mother was abusive. And he came to school, and he basically took all of that anger, and he directed it to the students around him. And somewhere along the way, he's playing this game, these penguins that are helping each other. And the teacher says, well, you can be like the penguins that are able to help each other. And you could think about your classmates in the same way. And somewhere along the way, that really registered. And he came back and he told the teacher, like, it clicked, and he said, I have such joy in helping in this game. And he started to take that to his school. He started to take that to his life. He started to come to school early to help the teacher. He started to leave late to help the teacher. And he went from being one of the worst students to one of the best students, all because of a little video game that wasn't even meant to educate. And with this, we realized that we'd better get into gaming. We better learn to build games that could do this deliberately. And what we did was we set out to target one main goal in gaming, which is to teach kids to code. Why? The original goal was if you could teach kids there to code, they're going to have a job. All right, let's teach them all to code, and from there on out, they're going to have a trajectory that is an opportunity in life, wherever they are. And what we realized along that journey was that that actually applied as much here in the United States. The need to learn to be digitally fluent, digitally capable, a true creator and not just a consumer of technology. It applied as much here as it did there. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that story of how a company that went from building operating systems to building games and focusing on emerging markets to focused on downtown San Francisco and everything in between, how we think about coding education for games. This is the state of coding education games right now. Kind of these 2D sprites. You have simple things that look like this. The challenge when a coding education game goes against a kid's discretionary time, a weekend comes along and I come home after school, I'm with my friends, what am I playing? Well, I'm playing this. If you go and you Google 100 best games of all time, the lists that show up, nowhere on there are education games, right? Until you realize that some of these games that have been built for entertainment are actually doing a better job of educating our kids than the education games that are out there. Minecraft is a great example, right? Minecraft, kids wanting to mod Minecraft has probably been the single largest trajectory of kids learning to code of any other single on-ramp. Right? Why? Because they love creating, they love building things, and they discover the more powerful way of building things is going and changing Minecraft itself. And it turns out that the core insight of everything that we're doing for coding education came down to the fact that that pathway of wanting to hack your video games was the single most common pathway of every engineer that I used to interview when I'd ask, how did you learn to code? And the answer was almost always the same. I loved cheating my video games. I loved breaking my video games. I loved hacking my video games. I discovered that I could go in, change the number of lives. I discovered I could go and change the thing to do what it was that I wanted. I loved playing Doom as a kid. I'm from Catalonia. I wanted it to be in Catalan. I figured out that I could change the audio file to something that was me speaking, and all of a sudden the character in the game was speaking my voice, in my language. So this sparked this insight of what if you could use games? What if you could use the fact that you can hack games and reveal what's behind the games? What if you could use that to teach kids to code? It started with our roots, which is in operating systems. First, 250 million players, let's not forget that. There's 250 million kids playing Fortnite, right? The magnitude, the scale, that's what happens when you have an entertainment product, right? Across all of the countries that we're targeting, whether it's China or India or Indonesia or Mexico or that little town in Guatemala or the United States, it's equally relevant everywhere. So the question, how do we get from this to this? And what I'm going to show you is 3 different ways in which we are thinking about that. 3 different companies, 3 different products, 3 different teams working on 3 different strategies that all evolve around the same notion of I can hack everything. The first starts with I can hack my entire operating system. So Endless has spent years building a very simple, easy-to-use Linux desktop operating system. Linux doesn't sound simple. Well, Android's based on Linux. You can make it simple. You can make it as simple as a smartphone, and that's what we've done, right, for kids who've never used a computer before. But the beauty of having the layers of Linux underneath it is that literally every layer underneath it is hackable. I can go in there and get my hands into it. Now, the insight was, what if you could actually make that a game? What if you could hide Easter eggs? What if you could have characters? What if you could have narrative? What if you could have it so that everything was quote-unquote flippable? You literally could click on an app, flip it, see all the code that powers it, tweak it, and now it's changed. And there's characters and a narrative drawing you through that experience. So that's a product called Hack. You can go, it's on Amazon, Parents Magazine, rated at the best first laptop for kids here in the United States. And so we're really excited about that. That also then evolved to another insight, which is, what if you could build an abundance of little games and sprinkle through these as part of this meta-narrative, build a bunch of little games that would allow us to have different trajectories for different age levels, different interest levels, and just kind of, some kids, you go get a phone, you want to play 5 different games. You don't play one game. Might we take that same approach and also use that as a chance to try different mechanics, to learn different things? What actually resonates with kids? So this is a little 1-minute trailer on what that looks like, so I'll show that.
Introducing the first generation of games from Endless Studios. Gamers building code-based games. All of our games are designed to break down the barriers of coding and get kids to think differently about technology. Players will take on and defeat the evil Shadow Warlord and his minions in The Dragon's Apprentice. Use their hacking, coding, and problem-solving skills to bring water back to the village in aqueducts. Get past scary creatures, overcome obstacles, and find the hidden map and passage. Master the roads and snag as much loot as possible without getting flattened in frog squash. And command their tanks and hack the AI to become the fastest, toughest tank commander around in Tank Warriors. Every one of these games has been designed to encourage free play, expression, curiosity, and creativity in an environment that is safe and open for all to use and share. You can get all of these Endless Studios games today for free on Hack, Endless OS, and FlatHub.
That little glitch at the end is a hint of what might be to come, because there may be things that are not quite revealed on the front. But what you do see there is a number of different approaches, which for us are, if you take that and you compare it to those 2D sprites, our goal is to push it as far along the commercial end of the spectrum as possible, and as far in the entertainment direction as possible. So what you've seen is one product called Hack, very much educational focused. All right, we're going to bring you in through an operating system. We're going to teach you how to code using the real tools that you use to code. We have something that sits in the middle on that entertainment education spectrum, which is what you just saw, targeting younger kids, that's 8 to 12-year-olds. And that's more purposeful learning, and yet it's also taking the things that we've heard. People say, oh, I loved hacking the AI behind this robocode game that I played as a kid. Great, we're going to make it so you can hack the AI behind your tanks. So playing that spectrum and learning mechanics. All of that really crescendoing to the third product that I'm going to show you in a second, which is called the Endless Mission. The Endless Mission is built in partnership with an amazing organization called Eline Media. Alan Gershenfeld, many of you will know. They built Never Alone, Minecraft EDU, and prior eras, everything from Zork to Call of Duty. So amazing team. As well as something called GameStar Mechanic, which is really about building video games, learning to build video games. So in partnership with them, we've taken all of these learnings into what really is on that end of spectrum of like, I'm going to teach and I'm going to just have fun. Like, we've taken the teach out of the room and we just say, look, how do you build something that's fun and not for the sake of teaching, but for the sake of being actually entertaining? What is it that's, if you look at one of the most popular genres right now is sandbox creation genres, right? Whether it's Roblox or Minecraft, like Legos at the end of the day are the delight of that creative instinct, the joy of building something, imagining something, and then creating it. Well, what is code? It's the most powerful tool that you can have to create whatever it is that you can imagine. And what is a game engine? Ultimately, a game engine powered by code is basically about as powerful as it gets. It's about as much leverage you have between what I want to do and what I want to imagine and being able to have it. And so what we have done is built a sandbox game with an adventure game that traverses throughout it as a pathway to scaffold you into creating whatever it is that you want. And I'll show you that little snippet of that game. Right here, you can see immediately the visuals look a little bit different than those traditional 2D coding games. So this is...
The Endless Mission, you play a character who's invited into a world within our own, where a conflict is unfolding between those who shape technology and those who are shaped by it. Meta? Meta. Follow a story that takes you through an ever-expanding classic set of game genres. Kart racing? Check. Platforming? Check. RTS? Check. More on the way like an FPS, soccer, footy for you international folks, and an RPG? Check, check, and check. Need more? Sure. Blend gameplay elements from all of them to mix and mash up your own games and share them with your friends. Want even more than that? If you insist. How about modding in real time to make games the likes of which the world has never seen? How far down does this rabbit hole go? You can even manipulate the code itself. I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of stuff. Don't worry, the devs are fine. Sorta.
Yeah, so we got 3 different teams, and the devs all look like that. The Endless Mission is envisioned as this sort of vast visual world. You're traversing different games. You're going in there. You're discovering things that you didn't, discovering Easter eggs. There's an adventure mode that flows through it. And ultimately, it all builds up towards a giant creation engine in which you can actually take the games you build in this, put them into Unity, do anything you want with them, and then import them back into this game and share them with your community. And a really cool set of multiplayer features that we have coming around both co-creation and co-play of the games that you co-created. So our approach to the world, I think, kind of comes very much from our early days as a company, which is in the early days, we had this dream of getting kids access to the best educational technology. And we went out into the place that we were trying to get to, knowing that we didn't know anything about it. But what we did know is that they have a good sense of what they want often. If you sit down and you talk with them, and you try and just ask them questions and get their advice, that from there you end up learning what you need to know. And the second is just this kind of classic, like Silicon Valley lean startup, iterate, try things, right? See what works, see what fails, throw things at the wall, and what you're going to discover is certain things work that you never would have imagined, and some of your core hypotheses, it turns out, are the opposite of what they should have been and could have been. So at our core, we have a kind of few core pillars to what we do. One is education and gaming need to be married with each other. They need the perspective of educators. They need the perspective of gamers. But at its core is if you take something that is fundamentally boring and you put points on it, it's not going to change the fact that it's boring. But if you take something that is fundamentally like an addictive core loop, I want to do that over and over and over again, that will teach kids to do whatever that core loop is. And if you have something like coding, where inherently that's what you're trying to get kids to do, then just try and make it fun. It doesn't matter what it is that, in other words, there's no teaching, it's just make it fun. So at its core, we have gamers building games. So the second is that we have taken an approach, as I mentioned before, around ideas can come from everywhere, right? We don't know what the right ideas will be. We have this abundance of flourishing ideas. And we have about a dozen different game studios around the world working on all of these different methodologies of all of these different games. So we have this small but thriving ecosystem of creativity coming from all of these different perspectives. And then the final piece is human-centered or community-centered co-creation, iteration. We can only take it so far. What we need is then the community to tell us what they want, the community to build what they want. And so each of those 3 projects, among the sort of endless brand of companies, Hack is the first one, the Endless Studios games, and the Endless Mission. Those are the three things. All of them focus on the core idea that it will ultimately be the community that turns it into whatever it is. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about each of these, you can follow all of these things on social media at Endless Impact. And please jump in, give us feedback. We want to know what's working. We want to know what's not working. And ultimately, we want you to actually get your hands in the code and build the thing with us. So thank you for your time, and I will leave you on this quote, which I think kind of somehow seems to be an answer for me to to the first quote, which is, at the end of the day, kids who do not like school will tell you it's not because it's too hard, it's because it's boring. Let's go use game, let's go make it fun.